Hey vlog, it's Erin, and um, as of late it's been really on my heart to start a series on transition. I really don't have like a professional format to it. I'm just going to speak into it and let God be God over it. And I just feel like there's a lot of people out there that maybe you've transitioned out of a church, maybe you're transitioning into a new season, maybe you're transitioning into another church, and many of you may not know my story and how long I was in ministry and transitioned into another ministry, then transitioned into a completely different industry. And I want to just share that because I think that it will encourage a lot of people. So to start off, my grandmother, my dad's mom, was a pastor, and she, phenomenal woman, just impacted the local community, inner city of Chicago in a huge way. And my dad is an ordained minister, so ministry runs in our family. I've been going to church on Sundays for as long as I can remember. And when I was 13, I did an internship at my church in Chicago, Illinois, and fell in love with the local church. I really felt like that's what God wanted me to do with my life. So I poured my heart into it. I did it for 3 summers in a row for as long as they offered it. And so from 13 to 15, I did that, or 13 to 16. And then from 16 to 18, I just interned at the church because I just loved it and I loved the people and I just wanted to help. And I was homeschooled, so my parents saw the passion in me for local ministry and what was in my heart to do. So they allowed me to do school at night and work during the day as an intern. At the age of 18, the church offered me a full-time job, and I took it and ran with it and had this big dream in my heart that I was going to assist these pastors that had kind of taken me under their wing. And eventually their dream was to take over that church because they were being mentored by our senior pastors. And it was my dream to assist them as they, would step into that line. 16 years later, I was still working there and assisting those young pastors that had been part of my life for a very long time. And they wound up not taking over that church because after many times of prayer and fasting, seeking out counsel, they just believed that the Lord was telling them not to do it. And that was kind of a dream crusher for me because that's what I had spent my whole life working towards is you're supposed to take over this church and I'm supposed to help you. And that was the only dream I had. And that was the only thing I had in my heart to do. And when that didn't happen, I kind of had to figure out, okay, what am I going to do now? My senior pastor at the time was really wanting me to stay on staff and to stay. But I really felt like, hey, if these young pastors that have been a part of my life for so long are not going to be here, I really don't feel like it's a good thing for me to stay. I don't want to stay. And so my plan was to give them like 6 months, a 6-month plan of leave. And hey, because I had my hand in everything. I was running this Bible study, running this program, gonna launch a internship program very soon, which is the same internship program that I was heavily impacted by. So I was really excited to get that started back up again. And, wanted to give a 6-month plan. So my plan was to have a 6-month transition, but to transition into an internship at the International House of Prayer in Kansas City and do an internship there and then figure out what I was going to do next because I knew I wanted to be in ministry, but I just didn't know what my next step was going to be. So I had a really long conversation with my senior pastor at the time, and he really wanted me to stay, but I just felt like I just couldn't say yes to that. And so he felt like it was the best interest for everyone if he just let me go. So had that conversation with him. I think it was like 2 or 3 days later. He sat me down and just said, I just probably should have done this a long time ago. Just gonna have to let you go, and you can give my assistant everything and she can transition everything over. So many of the programs and stuff that I was running and launching and helping launch, give it to her. And it was just like, you have to understand, like, not only did I start interning at this church when I was 13, but I was attending this church since first grade. So I've been a part of the same ministry all of my life up until that point. From first grade to 26 years old. It's a really long time. And to be technically like interning / working there from 13 till 26 is a really long time too. So at the time, I did nothing but cry. I did nothing but cry. Like I was crying all the time because I didn't know, like, my 6-month plan turned into it's over right now. You know what I mean? So, what am I supposed to do? Where am I supposed to go? And this is when you transition, when you get let go out of a church job, it's like you can't really stay. Like you can, but it's very difficult because like what are you, people have too many questions, you're emotionally wrecked. There's a lot of other people that are connected to you are emotionally wrecked, and people have a lot of opinions, and there's just a lot of things happening. So for me, after talking with my parents and praying about it and getting some counsel from the young pastors that were in my life, I felt like the best thing to do was to go to Arizona, which is where my parents were living, and to go there and to live there for 6 months and then go do the internship at the International House of Prayer. Super thankful for my parents who were like, you know what, we'll fly you out here. We'll pay for your car coming out here. We'll pay for your flight coming out here. We'll pay for the internship. Like my parents just went above and beyond to help me transition. And of course I stayed with them and, was just trying to figure everything out. And I spent a lot of time praying, spent a lot of time writing, spent a lot of time journaling and laying by the pool in the amazing weather, because at the time it was April, but it was a lot of rain, it was really cold in Illinois at the time. So, the hardest part for me was leaving the people that I loved so much. I had so many close friends, so many close relationships, so many people that I poured into, so many young women that I poured into, so many people that I received from. And so I understand the pain of transition. It was almost like my heart was pulled out of my chest because of the people that I was connected to. And when you love the local church and you love the local church being the people, it's a very emotional, it's like it's almost like death. It's like the grieving of the death of a certain life that you lived and a certain group of people that you were connected to that is no longer. And you really can't explain yourself. You really can't, like you can get into he said, she said, he did this because of this, or she said that because, but at that point it's like, you know what, God, I give it to you. I can't make sense of it. Maybe I don't feel like it was fair. Maybe I like whatever. Like that's beside the point in me sharing this story. It's more of I understand the pain of transition and what it's like to be fired from a church job and what it's like to transition and what it's like to feel like your life is ministry, but you don't know what your next step is. So along with that, like the one thing I want to share, there's so much more that I'll share as we continue this series on just church transition. But the one thing I want to share is when it comes to this is the story of Job. Because if you read that story, there's so many negative things that happened to him that he didn't deserve, but they still happened anyway. And so many of his friends judged him and tried to logically make sense of why all the negative things were happening to him. And that's what, when you transition out of a church, that's what typically happens is there's a group of people that love you and support you, but their minds cannot make sense of why you're transitioning, what happened, what you did wrong, why you did it wrong, where you stand, where they stand, and they're trying to logically process something that cannot really be logically processed. Yes, you could look at this, you could look at facts, but a lot of times when God is divinely transitioning you and moving you, you can't make sense of it. If you look at Job, it's like, could you say you were unrighteous or you did this wrong or you did that wrong, you didn't treat your wife right or you didn't treat God right, and that's why you took your kids and that's why your wife hates you and that's why you took your cattle and that's why your house burnt down, like all this other stuff. Or you can say that, you know what, God is divine and God holds Job's life in his hands, and Job is led by God, and that's all you can really do. That is all you can really say. And so I guess my encouragement in this particular video is that when people transition, the worst thing you can do is to try to make sense of it. When people suddenly leave or suddenly get fired, like granted, there's suddenlies for like immoral failures or affairs or money embezzlement or whatever. But when you have done nothing wrong necessarily legally, you know what I mean? And granted, like my pastor did what he felt was the best thing for him to do for himself, for me and for the organization. And you know what could have been done differently? Most likely, definitely yes, but it was what it was, and it is what it is. And there's a lot of people that have to kind of cut you off when you transition like that too, because you have to it's like if you're still involved in the church and the pastors and the leadership are seeing you a certain way, you almost have to take that on to a degree, because that's where you are. And you can't, as a person transitioning, blame the other people that are staying for the perspective that they have because they're under the leadership of that church. That is a very painful thing to walk through, because there's nothing you can do about it. There is nothing you can do about it. There's absolutely nothing you can do about it except to trust God and to know that your integrity will deliver you. And that's Proverbs 28:18, is that he who is blameless will be delivered, but he who is crooked will fall suddenly, you know? And so I want you to know, like, if you've transitioned or you got let go from a church job or you felt like it was unjust and unfair or whatever, you got to know that, number one, stop trying to make sense of something that is divine. Stop trying to bring logic into something that is illogical, because what God does in your life is illogical. The way that he moves in your life a lot of times is illogical. And if you live your life before God to please him, to love people, to stay honorable, to stay respectful, God will take care of you. There is nothing that he won't take care of for you. Don't look for logic, look for what is divine. Don't look for logic, look for God's leading in your life. And he will take care of your reputation. You don't have to fight for yourself. Like even to this day, that was almost 3 years ago now. And God has taught me not to try to take responsibility over protecting my own reputation or saving my face or saving myself and the way people view me. I cannot control the way my close friends view me or the way my friends who I used to have view me. I can't control that. But what I can control is my relationship with God. It's 1 Peter 2:13-25 in the Message translation. And it reads, "Make the master proud of you by being good citizens. Respect the authorities, whatever their level. They are God's emissaries for keeping order. It is God's will that by doing good you might cure the ignorance of the fools who think you're a danger to society. Exercise your freedom by serving God, not by breaking the rules. Treat everyone you meet with dignity. Love your spiritual family. Revere God. Respect the government. You who are servants, be good servants to your masters, not just to good masters, but also to bad ones. What counts is that you put up with it for God's sake when you're treated badly for no good reason. There's no particular virtue in accepting punishment that you well deserve. But if you're treated badly for good behavior and continue in spite of it to be a good servant, that is what counts with God. This is the kind of life you've been invited into, the kind of life Christ lived. He suffered everything that came his way so you would know what could be done and also know how to do it step by step. He never did one thing wrong, not once said anything amiss. They called him every name in the book, and he said nothing back. He suffered in silence, content to let God set things right. He used his servant body to carry our sins to the cross so we could be rid of sin, free to live the right way. His wounds became your healing. You were lost sheep with no idea who you were or where you were going. Now you're named and kept for good by the shepherd of your souls." What I love most about that passage, and one thing I think that we forget a lot, is that we are promised suffering. We are promised difficult things. It is promised to us that people will treat us wrong for doing good. It is promised to us that people will treat us badly for doing good things, for doing the right thing, for upholding the right standard. So we shouldn't be surprised if people treat us wrong or treat us badly or treat us unfairly. It's hard when it comes from people that you think should treat you a certain way and it doesn't, because there's expectations you put on people, and when they don't meet those expectations, it's a disappointment. But that's also something we have to work through, is to stop putting expectations on people, period, and allow ourselves to see people the way that God sees them. Because if we see people the way that God sees them, we won't have judgment or bitterness or hatred in our heart when they don't treat us the way we think they're supposed to. Because we get upset with God and with other people. It's like, they shouldn't be treating us that way, and I can't believe they did that and that and the other. And yeah, that's true. That's true. They shouldn't have treated us that way, and they shouldn't have said those things, and they shouldn't have painted us in a bad light and made us out to be something that we weren't. But number one, God fights for you. You don't have to fight for yourself. And number two, you're promised suffering. You're promised difficulty. You're promised people treating you wrong or treating you unfairly. But Jesus did everything the most perfectly. Jesus did everything right. Jesus was the most perfect, the most fair, the most perfect, but still people in the church treated him wrongly. But the way he lived it out, he suffered in silence. The way he lived it out is an example for us that God fights for us, and we shouldn't have hatred or bitterness or anger towards people who treat us unfairly or unjustly. But we should have compassion in our hearts for what they've done to us, because the only reason they've done that to us is because they don't see themselves the way that God sees them. Because if they saw themselves the way that God sees them, they wouldn't be treating us the way that they treated us. They wouldn't be saying about us what they've said about us. But God fights for us. Free yourself from the burden of trying to salvage your own reputation and let God fight for you. Stop trying to make logic of what is illogical, and just let God's divine hand continue to lead and guide you, just like Job. So this is the first video in church transitions and dealing with church hurt or whatever it is. But remember, your reputation is not, saving your reputation is not your responsibility, especially when you've done and are doing the right thing. God fights for you. Let God take care of you, because he will. So the other really cool thing about that is a lot of people don't know, when I moved out here to Arizona, within 2 weeks of me moving out here, God connected me to another church. I wasn't trying to work at that church, but God opened up a door, and through that experience, God completely restored everything negative in my head that I had about working in a church. God was flipping it in my own perception, in my own mind, because I think when something traumatic like that happens to you, you start to say, well, all pastors are like this, or certain people are like that, or certain people always treat me like this. But it wasn't the case. And not to even say that my old church was like that, because I'm super grateful for all that I've learned and all of my experiences that God has led me through there. But I'm just saying that it's really cool to see how God will restore things that you felt like you lost. The friendships that I took 10 plus years to develop and grow, I moved out to Arizona thinking, how in the world am I going to have that? And God restored it 10 times over and brought really great people into my life, great leaders into my life, great friendships into my life, and I couldn't be more grateful. Having said all of that, fast forwarding till now, transitioning out of that church job, basically came back from the IHOP internship, worked in women's ministry and finance for a while, and really figured out that that wasn't a good long-term fit for me. Senior pastor was like, hey, I can see that this isn't a good fit for you, but we'd love to keep you, but the only two positions we have are front desk or video media, if you want to take over one of those. And I just knew in my heart, neither of those were for me long term. What I wanted to do was young adults, but I couldn't do that full time. And so, and even the senior pastor was like, hey, just know if you decide not to stay, we want to help you find a job. It's not like you're not going to have one. We'll give you time, but just know we want you to stay. We just aren't able to create a position for you in young adults like you want. So I was super grateful for that. And even through that whole experience was God was once again showing me a different way of transitioning someone out of ministry in light of the experience I had previously. And it's just God restoring things to me. And I'm so grateful for that. So all of that to say, they gave me 2 months to find something. I didn't find something in 2 months, but in like 2 months and 2 weeks, I got a really cool opportunity to work for the Smithy Group, which is a digital marketing agency out of New York, Brooklyn, New York, and I work remotely and living in Phoenix, Arizona, and it's just been a phenomenal experience. More details to come about that, but I wanted to share that full story with you so that you can get the picture and understanding of where I come from, what my ministry story is, what I'm doing now. And so one thing that I did when I was working at Impact is my friend really encouraged me to do something with the knowledge that I have. I know how to do a lot, but I don't ever do anything for myself personally with the knowledge that I have. I'm always helping somebody else do something, but never doing anything for me. And so I started a podcast called Millennials in Ministry, and God has just opened up so many doors for me doing this, and I've grown so much, dealt with so much going through this. And so more to come about that, but it's been an incredible ride, and I know the best is yet to come.